Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. We like your comments. We read them, we check them, we like them. We answer back occasionally. Also, additionally, check out our website, www.legendofthesuperstitionmountains.com. Lots of goodies over there. So now we've gotten through all that. This week, we changed things up. A little bit of storytelling here. Now, I'm going through the files, and what happens is I'll start kind of peering through, and I'll see things, and they're kind of not always make sense. It'll say Pinal County, and I'll find stuff from Apache County, Gila County, different counties. So, and then Maricopa County. And for today, I thought I pulled some stuff out, and there was probably 7 or 8 stories under this file, but the file said 2 soldiers. And of course, we generally recognize the 2 soldiers as the 2 soldiers from Fort McDowell, the Superstitions. They end up at the Silver King, and they go back out. They find the one guy's body. They bury him out there, and all those trappings. But I found this kind of interesting because they were different soldiers from different areas. And I'd heard of the Sierra Estrella one version and a couple different ones. And then I found stories in there that didn't seem to particularly connect to the Superstitions or the 2 soldiers or anything else. But I found the stories interesting, so I was going through these various stories, and I wanted to share a couple of them. First one is a little different, something probably different than we've ever done. It takes place around 1878, and it involves 2 gentlemen. We're going to call them Smith and Jones, who had actually stolen 3 75-pound silver bars out of Globe, out of a warehouse down there by the mine. So they got out, spent 2 days on the run. They got up into the area up by the Tuttle Mountains, up by Mount Ord, and they got down this little canyon, and there was this cabin back in there, and they kind of approached it very slowly. They got up in there, and they looked around, finally cautiously got up, went up, found it was deserted. No sign of anyone had been there in a very long time. They realized it was way off the beaten path. They thought, this is a pretty good place. Maybe we can hold up for a few days here, let things cool off. So they went to get everything out and done. Jones got off, and Smith get off the horses. They go in. They've checked the place out. Smith says, I'm going to get a fire going. We're going to cook up some dinner and stuff. Why don't you go out and hobble the horses best you can for while we're here. We'll spend a day or 2 or 3 here and just kind of lay low for a little bit, kind of rest ourselves and make sure that no one's followed us, and then we're going to get ourselves back on the way. We'll kind of pick a direction what we're going to do. So Smith goes out. Jones is inside doing cooking, getting everything together. Smith goes out. They didn't bring proper hobbles, so he's going to hobble the horses with some rope. So he gets out, takes the pack mules, packing stuff off. Silver bars, there's 3 of them. They weigh 75 pounds apiece. So he puts them out on the ground out front and gets the pack and the pack saddles up on the patio, and takes the horses around the backside, and he takes some rope and hobbles them up. Takes them a little while, gets everything strung up and all. Gets done, comes around the front, comes inside, sits down. They finish cooking things up, get something to eat. They kind of keep an eye out through the front. Nobody's been around. They don't think anyone's going to come around. Jones is quite at ease. He says, I don't think anybody's following us. I don't think anything. But Smith is bothered because he said he noticed with the horses when he's hobbling them, one of them had a broken shoe. And his worry is someone might be able to track us because of that broken shoe on that horse. And Smith says, Jones says, you're way overthinking this. Don't worry about it. Let's just have dinner. So they have dinner. Sun goes down. And Smith is still bothered, and he tells Jones, I'm going to go out and move those silver bars, at least throw something over them, cover them up. We need to do something with them. Maybe dig a little hole, bury them in there. I don't like just leaving that stuff out. Because anyone comes by, that's going to tell them if they've heard that there was that robbery, that we're the guys. So he goes out. Jones tells him, go do it. So he goes out and then comes back in about 4 or 5 minutes later and says, I can't find him. It's too dark. I thought I knew where I put him, but I can't see anything. So Jones says, take a piece of wood. Let's get a torch together. We'll go out and look for him. They go out and they start looking around all over the place, and they can't find him. And they're looking and looking and pretty sure where he dropped the stuff. So Jones says, what did you do? While I was in cooking dinner, did you go, and while I was here busy, did you go and hide these and bury these? I think you're just doing a cover story. And Smith says, no. In fact, what I think happened is that while I'm hobbling the horses and stuff, you weren't cooking because you didn't get very far while it was gone. I think you came out and moved them somewhere else. And they were both trying to argue with the other about who could have moved it, where are they, and they kept getting more and more tensed up. Finally, Smith reaches down, so puts his hand on his gun. Jones gets alarmed, starts to drop his hand. Because he drops his hand, then Smith starts to pull his firearm. Jones pulls his. Jones shoots Smith in the forehead. Smith shoots Jones in the heart, and they both fall away dead. Kind of end of story, right? So why do we know this? There was a specialty deputy sheriff. His name was, I'm trying to remember what it was. Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy. Kind of a common name. Anyways, he left to go after them. Track them. So he comes back in about 2 days after this happens, gets into Globe, goes down to the warehouse, meets with the storekeeper, says, I got those 3 bars back. And storekeeper looks at him and says, that was pretty quick. He said, well, it was an easy job. Said they get the 3 bars in, and Hardy's getting ready to leave, and storekeeper says, so do you mind me asking, how'd you get those back? Hardy says, strangest thing. Just found them laying there on the ground. I went over, picked them up, took them away. And he got on his horse and started riding away. And the storekeeper said, what happened to those 2 young fellas that took off out of here that we're looking for? He said, I tracked them for quite a while. They had a broken shoe on one of the horses, so they're pretty easy to track. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. I don't think they'll be bothering anybody for a while. Now, this story could be kind of altered and changed. I had never really heard of it, and I picked it up and looked for a couple sources, and I thought it was an interesting story. It's one of those anecdotal stories that makes you always question it because it's got like the punchline at the end. And it was short, but it's sweet, but it's a good campfire tale. But then I thought, well, we have a silver tale, but it's recovered silver. But what everybody's always waiting for is that gold tale, right? The gold and the superstitions out along the Salt River somewhere. So I had this story. Now, a lot of people, you can look it up, there was a place called Camp Reno. When Fort McDowell was established, they established Camp Reno up in Reno Pass by Mount Ord. Now, don't get the two confused. There's 2 Mount Ords. One is basically called Mount Baldy. It's out on more the eastern Arizona, out in the White Mountains. This is the Mount Ord that's kind of on the way to Payson kind of area. Named after the same guys, by the way. Anyways, when Fort McDowell is established, they put a camp, Reno Pass, between there and Payson. And it was a small camp. It was there probably 4 or 5 years, 6 years before that just was useless and they got rid of it. But during the time it was there, the military there would notice that Apaches would come in and they would bring in small amounts of gold to trade for flour, sugar, blankets, a bunch of different necessities. And they were kind of like asked a few questions. Apaches wouldn't say nothing. They kind of realized, okay, no reason to follow them. They're going to lose us out there. They're coming in peacefully trading, and we're established here to keep the peace. So we're just going to let it be for right now, because we got no clue, and there's no way we're going to figure it out. They let it be. Also, the ranchers in the area. There was quite a few ranchers around that area that were established. And the word was, a number of the ranchers, the Apaches would come down to them and want a side of beef, want a steer. And they would pay 3 times the gold for that steer that these guys could get on the market. So the ranchers again thought, we got a kind of a peaceful trade. The Apaches are coming in. Why would we disrupt this? They're not coming in trying to steal the cattle. They're coming in with this little bit of gold. Now, the Apaches had learned from the Spanish, one, gold's considered very valuable to white men. Two, do not tell the white men where the gold comes from. So they were using it. They didn't really understand the true value, but they knew they could use it for trade barter and use it to get goods and so forth and meat. So they went to that extent. Now there's two soldiers. Now there is a story out there. There was 9 soldiers that decided to leave, and they decided to go leave Camp Reno, and they went out, and when the camp was shutting down, and they went up the mountains. But the actual story that I've kind of seen the most was there was 2 soldiers. 2 soldiers, like I started. And the 2 soldiers were up there, and they knew about, the Apaches coming in. So as they mustered out, they went to leave, and they got a pack mule, and they got supplies, and they were going to go out and look for this mine. And they kind of made it common knowledge they were. So as they're leaving, a patrol was coming back in, and the officers asked them, "Hey, where are you going?" And they told them, "We're going to go up in here. We're going to be looking for where the Apaches get the mine. We're going to look and see if we can kind of figure it out or track them and all this." And the officers there told them, "No, that's not a good idea, We're not having problems. There doesn't seem to be some major issue right now. Why would you want to stir things up? It's probably a bad thing." They ignored them. They went off. No one ever hears from them again. About 5 years later, now figure this is around when they stopped, they shut down the fort. About 5 years later, some shepherds find 5 skeletal remains. So they find these 5 bodies. They look around and kind of check things out, realize they've been there a long, long time, but they go down to tell some military people and the sheriff's office locally about up there. So they go up and they find these 5 victims. Now this is where I don't understand the 9-person story, but the 5-person story has 2 versions itself. In both, there's 2 soldiers. They can find that they can tell they're wearing uniforms and so forth, and the buttons and this and that. But in one story, there are 3 civilian bodies in civilian clothes found. In the other version of the story, it's 3 Apaches that they find with these 2 men. They said all the gear is gone, so which makes me believe that it might have been just normal civilians, not possibly Apaches, that had hooked up with the soldiers. But they said all the arms are gone. There's no knives, there's no guns, no rifles, no other equipment or so forth whatsoever. Boots are gone, that kind of thing. So everything was taken that was usable really at the time, and they made off with it. So they believe the Apaches had got a hold of these 2 guys. Maybe they had partnered up or were working with someone else. Now there's a man named I'm trying to look. I'm having Henry Hart, because we had Hardy earlier. This is Henry Hart. He had actually lived up in the area at the time, and he saw when they recovered these bodies a piece of the ore. It was like 2 inches wide by 3 inches long. And he said at least a third of it that you could see was full of gold. They found this laying there next to the bodies. Now, some people believe that they had found the mine or found the source, and this was one of the pieces that was left behind. They also believe maybe they had found that and they were coming back with that piece. I think they would have had more. Maybe the Apaches took the rest. Also, a number of other people believe that they never found anything, but the Apaches, to warn people off for what these men were trying to do, was they killed them. They took all the things and they put that piece of ore there on the ground just to tell people, this is what they were looking for. Best not to search. Now, the story's good. I found several accounts of it. Like I said, it's one of those stories where you got the 9 people, the 2 soldiers, the 5 people, you got this and that. They give you a couple brief names. They don't remember the soldiers' names at all. They say they were forgotten in the 5-year period. But that was probably just because if we're dealing honestly with the story, that they just left. Now, there's a number of other stories, and we will get to some of the other ones of the lost, or not lost, because they're not lost, the Apache mines up in that area around Mount Ord, because there's a number of stories associated with them differently. But in this case, what I kind of also question is that the men were mustering out. Now, in some cases, they're called deserters, but they say they muster out. But why are they still wearing their entire military uniforms and have their 50 caliber rifles? If they were deserters, the officers wouldn't have just said, "Hey, where you going?" And they would have just, it might have been something more to that. They might have been looking for them. And if they were mustered out, I don't understand them just letting them take their uniforms, their issued rifles, and everything else. It gets kind of questionable on the story and the status. So I hate to ruin a good story. And like I said, there's quite a few different stories concerning the Apache mines in that area. And we will get to some others. Some of them are a little better documentation. But I wanted everybody, those two stories are interesting. One for me is, it's just the Globe silver bars. I have a picture somewhere of myself holding probably a 75-pound at least silver bar. Jack San Felice got it from the Silver King or someone he knew. He let me hold. And I got a photograph with that years ago. And then the second one, I just kind of liked the whole two soldiers, a different kind of spin. They're killed, they go out there, they find them. It's the military button thing and so forth. In this case, they found gold. The other soldiers' story, the same thing. They had a jar with their ore in it, and it had the names of the soldiers in the jar, but it got lost and nobody remembers their names. So there is that kind of parallel. And I know there's the Estrella Mountains version of this two soldiers, and we'll do other two soldiers mines. So I just find that interesting because anywhere you go, any state, there's a two soldiers story of treasure, mines, or something. So kind of interesting. I hope everybody enjoyed those two tales this week. A little lighter. Not quite as dark as last week. Thank you for watching the videos and all the great feedback we're getting. Getting through the hot summer. We're up in the teens now for probably the next month or two. And we'll start talking rendezvous stuff and kind of throwing some stuff out there probably in about a month. But for right now, I look forward to November and being out in the Superstitions and a little cooler air. But right now, that seems so far away. So until the next time, thank you for joining us. Always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.